Welcome, everyone. I can already tell this is going to be a very fun virtual event. My name is Stephanie Steinberg. I am the Executive Director of Coaching Detroit Forward and also the CEO of the Detroit Writing Room. I'm very excited to host this virtual launch party for Kiddos and Insights with Albiona. Couple housekeeping notes before we get started. If you can put yourself on mute when Albiona is talking, that would be fantastic. That way we don't get any weird background noise. There will be a Q&A portion at the end where you will be welcome to take yourself off mute and ask questions. And if you have questions, please feel free to jot them down and hold them to the end. I also want to give everyone a chance to introduce themselves. I know a lot of you already know Albiona, but if you don't, feel free to use the chat box and say hi, who you are, where you're from, if there's anything in particular you're hoping to learn tonight. The chat box is welcome for everyone to use. You can even connect and share your Instagram handles and social handles if you'd like to. So feel free as I'm talking right now to use the chat box to say hi and introduce yourself. And a little bit more about me. I want to thank everyone tonight for supporting Coaching Detroit Forward through your ticket. Coaching Detroit Forward is the nonprofit arm of the Detroit Writing Room. And we work with Detroit high school students over the summer and also hopefully in after school programs to produce things like this beautiful magazine, which was written by Detroit students and also features stories by the students. And our programs are all free to attend. So over last summer, they were mostly virtual, and we still were able to put together really great photography camps, journalism, and we're hoping to do it all again this coming summer with the goal of them being in person, of course. So your donation tonight helps support those programs for the students, and I just want to thank you for doing that. But without further ado, I am so excited to host this party tonight virtually. I've been working with Albiona for almost a year now on this great content that she's been putting together for Kiddos and Insights. And she's going to give you a great tour of the site tonight. And like I said, answer some of your parenting questions. So feel free to keep introducing yourself in the chat box if you'd like to, or not, that's okay. But I would love to kick it off with Albiona and ask her a little bit more about why she started Kiddos and Insights and what inspired her to create this wonderful new platform for parents.
Thanks, Stephanie. I appreciate it. And thank you, everyone. It's nice to see, obviously, a lot of familiar faces, and I see some new faces, which is really exciting too. So welcome. And so, yes, to Stephanie's question, she asked me about why I created Kiddos and Insights. So it sort of started a little while back, and I just really started with the idea that I wanted to write a parenting book. And from there, I sort of dabbled with the idea of writing, and if I was going to try to be a writer, what would that look like, and what would it entail, and what kind of a time commitment is it, and am I any good at it? And so I kind of just explored that side of things, and that's what brought me to Stephanie and to the Detroit Writing Room. And so through that process, I just decided that before I sort of embark on 40 to 50,000 words in terms of a book, why don't I start with a website or a blog, share these bite-sized pieces of
Albiona, I think we're losing you a little bit. Are you guys having trouble?
And that use that.
Yeah, you're having trouble. Okay, Albiona, can you call in through your phone? How we discussed before. Sorry, guys, technical difficulties.
I think if you get it a minute, or if she tries to come back in.
Yeah, we're gonna have her call in with audio.
Okay. Sometimes if she tried to just get back in, maybe the connection will be better. Okay.
All right, you're back.
Back. Okay. Sorry, Steph, you're going to have to share your screen.
That's
So
okay.
is that a better connection?
It is. How about you back up a little bit? Because I think we lost pretty much everything that you said.
No worries, no problem. It's so funny. Just for the record, everyone, Stephanie and I have had multiple Zoom calls, and not one time have we had one unstable internet connection. So it makes for a pretty funny moment here that it would happen tonight. So, yep, let me back up. I'll start over. So I created Kiddos and Insights out of actually an initial desire to write a book. And that is where it all began. And I thought I want to write a book about kids and parenting. And I decided that before I dove into the process of putting 45,000 words down to paper, that I would kind of stick my foot in the water or my toe in the water and see, how do I even like writing, and what would it be like if I just started to share articles and thoughts and maybe some concrete ideas about what's worked and what hasn't worked for me as a parent, or what I've seen throughout my years working with kids. So that's where I met Stephanie and where I came to the Detroit Writing Room, so I could sort of hone in on that skill. And if I was going to take it seriously, I wanted to really do it correctly and do it well. So that's sort of where that process began. And then as far as my own sort of philosophy or my own take on parenting goes, I sort of approach it in a very, for starters, in a non-judgmental way, meaning I don't think there is a right way to parent or a wrong way to parent, but I think that as far as parenting goes, you have to really consider who your child is. You have to consider your own relationship to your child or your children. Each of those relationships will bring something different out in you. And that, how can we sort of make it a reflective process so that you're sort of getting things out of it that are meant to really help you continue to grow and carve out your path and continue on your journey, but while also making your kids everything they need to be so they can continue to live their life in the greatest, with the greatest potential, or to their greatest potential. So that was part of it. And then the other part of it was when I started to kind of look around at resources, I would see two different camps. One was either really prescriptive and a lot of how-to advice, and it almost felt very judgmental, very lectury. Like, if you want your kids to be organized, you have to do A, B, and C. And if you want your kids to do well in school, you need to do 1, 2, 3. So it always felt like these to-do lists. It always felt like if you didn't do every one of these things, then you weren't, cut out to do a good job as a parent, or you wouldn't be considered as such. Or the other camp was like very woo-woo, which I'm a little bit that way myself, and I like a good sort of reflective moment, but it was so far the other way. The pendulum swung completely further, probably much further than it needed to. So in that scenario, you'll look on websites and I'll see things like, my kid just punched another kid, what should I do? And the advice is, go give them a hug. Like, maybe, I'm not against that, but to some extent, I think that's not natural either. And we have to really equip our kids and help our kids and really teach them sort of what their boundaries are. So it's sort of taking those two worlds, a little bit of woo-woo and a little bit of logic, and how do we bring it all together and just put together some really good, hopefully good pieces that will help parents navigate that journey.
All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen so that we all get a nice virtual tour of the site, and Albiona will talk as I do that. So hang on. Okay.
All right.
You guys see it okay? Yeah, okay. Albiona, go for it. You can guide me where to go.
Okay, so we'll stay on the homepage for a minute. So when you get to the site, you're going to obviously land on the homepage, and the first 3 articles, I think the site's been live for about a week. So those first 3 articles are really a nice sort of broad representation of the themes and the types of articles you'll find on the website. So the first one, Parenting Mindfully, we'll dive into that a little bit more in just a bit, but that one really is the crux of how I've navigated so many decisions in my own life. And that goes over my 4-step process that I refer to as PAR, which just means pause, acknowledge, respond, and reflect. That's what that acronym stands for. And I'll walk you through that in just a minute, but I use that a lot, and you'll see it throughout many articles. So I just want to make sure that I kind of explain that to everybody. And then the shame and the behavior management article, and then do you have a nickname? The do you have a nickname article is another one that's near and dear to my heart. And the reason I shared that one is it kind of falls under the bucket of stories and insights. And that's a category or a category on the website where you can find stories that are either other parents share or interviews with experts in different areas. And I'll try to kind of gather as much information from different avenues and continue to share it with families and with parents, because I think it's important that through that storytelling, we can connect and we can see each other and we can have those parallel moments where maybe we have completely different environments and maybe our lives are so different in so many ways, but there are always those themes that connect us. So in that particular story, do you have a nickname? That's my particular story of how a really special group of 4-year-olds kind of walked me through the notion of how to sort of stand proud in my name and realize that having a unique name is really a gift, and being able to really express that. And so you can feel free to read that at any time. But so the 3 articles at the top there are just sort of an overarching idea of what you can expect to find in terms of the themes and you know, some of the areas we'll explore. So then there's about me. So just quickly, I have a little over 20 years of experience with working with children. I was a teacher for 12 years, and my bachelor's is in early childhood development. And later, after teaching for 12 years, I went on and received a master's degree in speech and language pathology. And I did a little bit of a pivot, and I still work with kids, but I do it in a pediatric setting as a speech therapist. So, and I'm also a mom, I should say that as well, of a 14-year-old and a 17-year-old. So it's been a fantastic 20 plus years, and I'm still working and I still love it. And there's just something that, you know, I can't really put a finger on it, but I feel like when I am working with the kiddo, I'm able to sort of tune into them. And I just think that's out of a desire to really figure out how I can get the best out of them. So be it if that's my own children or be it if that's a child that I'm working with, my job is always not to really expect that child to adhere or do anything differently for me, but it's for me to figure out who they are and how I can bring the best out of them and what I need to do to make sure I create an environment where that's going to happen. So you'll kind of see that theme reoccurring throughout a lot of the articles as well. And then towards the bottom, you'll always be able to find the latest 3 articles. So in this particular week, this happened to be a series, a 3-part series that I did on tackling tantrums and challenging behaviors. And we kind of go into 3 different areas to consider. I'd like to think when I'm writing, and you can certainly give me some feedback if it's not the case, I try to do it in a way where I hope it comes off as suggestions. And what you can do is you can sort of build a toolbox and you can take that back home with you. And in your own parenting experience, you can sort of look at your own situation and really decide what the best fit might be. And an example of that is in the first article, I talk about a method called framing. And framing is just the idea that you're going to try to get ahead of the behavior. So when my son was younger, and I talk about this a little bit in the article, he always had a difficult time transitioning. And in particular, if his friends or cousins, or if there was something fun still happening and we had to leave earlier, generally a pretty epic tantrum would ensue. So to get ahead of it, I would sort of say to him before we even arrived, like, we're going to go to the park. We're probably going to have to leave before your cousins do. Here's what I need you to do. You have to come and hold my hand. I don't want you to scream and cry. And if you do a good job and you do all those things, either maybe there's a surprise in the car, or maybe the promise is that we come back tomorrow. But the idea is that you lay out all the steps before it even happens so that they have a roadmap, so that at that moment when I say, okay, it's time to go, we've talked about it and we don't have to work through it right now while they're in that emotionally heightened state anymore. Now it's just something that we revisit, and it's a much smoother, a much easier transition. So I had to use that with him quite often, but it worked pretty well. My daughter didn't need that. So that's what I mean. So sometimes you'll be looking at something and you might be reading it. It doesn't mean that that's the right thing for every single child. For my daughter, it wasn't necessary that I sort of she was actually the type of child that didn't even really need a 5-minute warning for something. Like 5 minutes before we leave, she was just quicker to transition, and that wasn't her challenge. So again, figuring out, sort of taking that content and realizing what is it that will really benefit my household, my life as a parent, so that I can find some calm, peace, and balance, and that will allow my child to be able to basically do the same. So, all right, Stephanie, we can probably jump into the behavioral toolbox if you want.
Got it.
Right. So with that said, the next sort of bucket is just that, what I sort of mentioned about a toolbox. So this is, again, just the idea of, can I give you little snippets and tools and ways to navigate some of your own challenges as a parent? And hopefully, you know, maybe the suggestions will help. Maybe one article is really relevant to you and maybe another one doesn't pertain to your particular situation. But I try to touch on 2 different things in this toolbox. One is going to be a little bit more prescriptive, a little bit more concrete. So examples of that is the tantrum series, for starters. Another one would be something like collaborative discipline. That's an article that talks about how to sort of create house rules and do it as a family, and to sort of go through a process of voting on the rules, and then also having your kids decide, depending on their ages, what an appropriate consequence is if a rule is broken. So this really allows them to be part of that complete process and has some ownership over it. And there isn't really questions of like a fairness or not. It's something that everyone agreed on. And so once something's violated or broken, it does just make so much, it makes that whole process a lot more easier, and kids tend to adhere to that a lot better. And there's something about that collaboration on creating the rules. Kids will naturally respect that a little bit more because they were part of the process versus being told from an authoritative place that you have to do it this way or you have to do it that way. The other part of the website, or the other part of this bucket, I'm sorry, the behavioral toolbox, they're going to be reflective pieces. So for instance, like I'm looking at it right now, the one with me and my son. So in that particular article, I talk about how I remedied sarcasm by pausing. So that's an interesting one. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about the PAR method in that one. But in this article, I talk about what it feels like when your child goes from sort of being just that, a child, and embarks on sort of that teenage adolescent phase. And it's interesting because for me, at least, I felt very comfortable when the children were younger, or my children were younger. As they got older and those teenage years began, I think my expectations weren't quite in line with what was fair. And I also think to some extent what ended up happening was that I started to mirror the way that they spoke. So if he was sarcastic, I was sarcastic back. If I felt annoyed, I no longer practiced patience like I would have when they were little, but I just sort of let myself snap or say something that, and I think I make this reference in the article, but I would say something that I probably would have never said to a coworker or to a family member or to a friend. But for whatever reason, it was like fair game for me to say something like, oh, that seemed like a good idea. That's smart. You know, like something even that clipped and short. But again, like we don't talk to people that we have boundaries with in that same way. So I go through that process and I talk about how it wasn't until I saw him doing it with his sister that I got myself to pause, and I really realized that what I was doing was he was mimicking exactly what I had been doing. So it allowed me to sort of scale back and say, A, why are my expectations as such? B, at what point did it become permissible for me to adjust the way that I spoke? And C, really grappling with the fact that maybe I didn't feel so comfortable with the methods that I had to raise teenagers, and maybe I needed to dive a little bit deeper and figure him out a little bit more and not just take things at surface value. And it was a real big, pivot for us. So I would definitely say that that's another article that I think has resonated with some, in particular if your children are teenagers. And I think it's because that sarcasm piece is really benign and it happens in a way where we don't even catch it. And for me, at least, it wasn't until I started to see the ripple effect of it that I started to realize my own role in it. Now, again, if I didn't take a moment to pause and if I didn't choose to reflect, what could have happened was I could have just chose to discipline my son and say something like, you can't talk to your sister like that. I'm going to take your phone, whatever the consequence would be. But the truth is that then disconnects that whole idea of that connection between parent, child, environment, all those other variables. The totality of the situation has to be considered. And also, it would have robbed me of really being able to look deeply at myself and say, why am I doing that? And then to really sort of sit with that discomfort and to say, like, let's adjust here. And that's not okay. So it allowed me to sort of really look at myself in a pretty honest way and say, what changes can I make? What can I bring to the table that will allow for a better outcome here versus going right in and just trying to fix the child or fix the problem. So that's just a quick example. And I go into a lot of other ones if you have read some of the other articles in there too. So we can go out of this, we can get out of this one, Stephanie. And if you want, I think we can jump over to stories and insights.
Got it.
So stories and insights, I mentioned already my nickname one. And then my other big feature story was my buddy, Max. And I can't see anyone, so I don't know if Elizabeth is on the call, but if she is, a big thank you to her because, you know, it's not easy to sit down, and we did this over Teams because it was during COVID, and Elizabeth's my friend, but also, you know, we both jokingly said when we sat to do this, and we've talked about Max several times, and, you know, me either wearing my therapist hat or her just mom to mom on the side of the soccer field. And when we sat down to really dig deep about it and really kind of reveal a little bit more, we both sort of said to each other, she said, I'm nervous. And I said, I'm kind of nervous too. And we like had a laugh about it because it was nothing new to either of us. And that, you know, we were both kind of excited to share. So I think that comes from that space of it's hard to be vulnerable and it's hard to really open up about those journeys and those experiences. And, you know, I can't speak for Elizabeth, but for me, the takeaway was that so much of what she experiences in her everyday life, I was listening to her and I experienced a lot of those same themes too, of second guessing myself, or is that right? Or is that wrong? Or letting go, right? Just being able to say, is that really important? It's not, just let that go, right? So she was courageous to do it and I'm forever grateful. And I think Max's story is a really special one, not just because of Elizabeth's vulnerability and strength and how much she shared, but also just he's a little rock star. And for though, you know, if you don't know him, and I mean, I'm lucky enough that I get to say I know him, but he's got quite the spirit and he just reminds you that there's joy in everything. So we'll continue to share more stories like this. I have more things in the works. Another story from another really courageous mom will be coming up soon. And then I have my fingers crossed, but I might be able to get some good information from a child psychiatrist who works particularly with kiddos with ADHD, anxiety. So we'll start to tackle some of those other areas that I don't necessarily feel like I have expertise in, but that I know a lot of parents have questions about. So maybe we can just have some conversations, unpack some maybe, you know, ideas that we might have about it, or just really face some hard truths and see where to go from there. So you'll find all of those types of articles under Stories and Insights. And then the last one, I think we can jump into helping kiddos. So I knew that if I was going to start a website, that to some extent, I had to highlight all the really great organizations that are on the ground, or people, I should say, on the ground who are working so tirelessly to positively impact the lives of kids, the youth, anybody in sort of all of our young people in the Detroit area. And so Leah Carroll was, she's an artist and she does Drawn to Detroit. And so for those of you, if you haven't had a chance to look at the article, please check it out. But in addition to just being a fantastic artist and somebody who has, you know, beautiful Detroit sketches and drawings, I have one framed in my house right now. What she does is she also does art therapy to treat trauma in teens, anxiety, depression, a lot of different mental ailments that kids struggle with. So she uses art therapy. She has a master's degree in art therapy, and she does these programs based off of donations. And she's able to get these kids in there and they can do some real amazing things together. And there is so much to be said about exploring different mediums to really channel some of those feelings, some of those emotions. We know with kids, they don't always have the language to articulate what they're feeling, what they're going through. And something pretty special happens when you can just kind of let them sit down and freely create and draw and color or whatever it is that they choose to do. And I think it's pretty amazing that Leah has the ability to do that and to tap into something pretty special with these kids. So I wanted to spotlight her. I wanted to spotlight the great work she was doing. my own personal feeling is we don't recognize or have enough information about mental illness. And I think any avenue that supports it, brings attention to it, or is working to sort of positively unpack it in a good way and give these kids some support, I think I'm definitely all in for that.
And Leah is here on the call too. So Leah, if you want to quickly say hi, you're welcome to. I see her right here.
Hi, Leah.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you for having me.
Elena, would you want to go into PAR just a little bit more to kind of explain how you came up with it and just to back up again, what exactly it stands for?
Sure. Yeah. Stephanie, I'm going to bug you to go to the article, subscribing to the idea of, or to the, about being a good mom. It should be closer to the top.
Is it in the behavioral toolbox?
Yes. Yeah, so while we find that article, so like I mentioned before, pause, or PAR stands for pause, acknowledge, respond, reflect. So to make a long story short, the way this all came about was I reflected first, meaning an event would happen or something would happen. And sometimes it was really mild. It wasn't always this big ordeal or something that was terribly troubling, but something would happen that would either stress me out or I would have a reaction, and it would be this quick sort of knee-jerk reactionary type of parenting that I later looked back on and thought, why did I say that? Or why did I do that? Or was my reaction disproportionate to what really happened? So in that moment of reflection, I would start to sort of go backwards, and I would start to say, well, go to the beginning, like what actually happened? At what point did, like for myself, I would say, when did I feel triggered? Meaning, and when I say triggered, it doesn't necessarily mean anything more than you just feel slightly agitated and you just find yourself in that space where you know you're just going to fire off a quick response, or you're going to be really reactionary, and it's not going to be a thoughtful, let me really process and digest what just happened and let me say something or respond to it. So I started to think to myself, what if I could just, in that moment, the minute I recognize it, instead of answering, what if I just paused? And the pause can be as quick as just 1 to 2 deep breaths. And sometimes the pause is just, it might just be a quick second, just enough time to stop you from making those quick reactionary parenting decisions. I think that we kind of fall into the trap of doing in the everyday, hustle and bustle of life. So then I would start to say, well, what if I paused? And what if, I didn't have enough time to, like, if you're in the middle of a conflict, and I think every parent knows this. So even if your kids are younger, older, I mean, this kind of works across the board. I mean, time is usually of the essence. So you don't have a lot of time to like sit and meditate on it when you're in the middle of, a completely, if it's an argument or if somebody's trying to get to some place and you have to make a quick decision. So it's not ideal that you sit and reflect in that moment, but if you can just pause and acknowledge. So then I sort of thought, well, I can commit to that. I can commit to just pausing and realizing, I know this isn't going to go well, or I know I'm about to respond from a place that isn't my best place. And that will automatically change the way you're going to respond. And sometimes the response might be, give me a minute. And even that's better than a quick fired reaction, a reactionary or a tempered response. Maybe just saying, I need a minute. Or maybe just that quick little pivot, I take a deep breath, and sometimes I'll realize, let it go. This is not even worth, let Adrian go to his friends, or let Hannah, those are my kids, right? So like sometimes all it takes is that quick second for me to just, pull back and say, oh, like, no, calm down. You can do it. And then I'll just change my response. And then it isn't until it's done that then I'll sit down and I'll go back and reflect. And then usually what ends up happening is I can kind of pinpoint and realize what happened. So I'm going to go through this article quickly, and I'm going to kind of give you those 4 steps in an example just to help illustrate it. So when my kids were younger, they were in elementary school, my work demands grew. And it was at that time that I went back to graduate school, and the program that I was in was a full-time program. And so I had an internship where I was working a lot of hours, and it wasn't by choice. But at the same time, I was really excited because I was sinking my teeth into something new and I really loved it. And so I had these conflicting feelings of feeling guilty that I wasn't going to be there for my kids as much as I usually am, but then B, feeling very excited that I was embarking on something new and it was kind of my own, and feeling like, is that selfish of me to feel that way? So sort of having this back and forth, tug of war with myself about that. And so what ended up happening was I was enjoying it and everything was going great, but I was exhausted. And in part because what would happen is I was placing so many expectations on myself when I came home, because the guilt of not being home during the day was eating at me. So I felt like I almost had to be super mom when I walked through the door, and I had to be an even better mom. And so what ended up happening was, on that drive home for me in particular, was when the fatigue would set in. And so what I would end up doing is I'd feel really tired. And what I really wanted was just, after seeing my kids, I just wanted 5 minutes to just collect myself and reset, but I wouldn't do it. So I would come home, I would be tired, I'd be excited to see them, and then I would immediately start nagging and not being very nice. And, it would turn into like, how much homework do you have? Who left that there? Why is there a mess over here? Right. And then I would just start to nitpick all these things. So I sort of sat with it and I thought, well, no one's too happy to see me after, that kind of, me walking in with and dumping on everybody about everything that was wrong. So I sat with it and I thought, all right, pause, acknowledge you're feeling exhausted, and you have every right to feel exhausted. Respond. Maybe instead of forcing myself to sort of work through that fatigue, why not just take 5 minutes and just have 5 minutes of quiet, reset after I see the kids, and then jump into my evening. So I did that. And then later when I reflected on it, the funny thing is like a surface reflection would be, okay, problem solved. I thought about it. I needed the extra 5 minutes, and 5 to 10 minutes worked out, problem solved, we're set. But I had to dig deeper than that. And this is where sort of the title of the article came from. Why wouldn't I ask for 5 or 10 minutes? And that was the real question, right? It wasn't that why was I being mean, or why was I nagging, or why was I tired, or why did I feel guilty? The question is, why did I think to myself, it was not okay to say to my family, who loves me more than anyone, that I need 5 to 10 minutes to just reset before the rest of the evening? And if I dug a little deeper and I sat with that, the reason is because all those sort of scripts in my mind kept running, like, a good mom doesn't complain. A good mom can do it. A good mom doesn't say she's tired. A good mom doesn't need 5 to 10 minutes. A good mom just jumps right in there and gets going. A good mom doesn't ask for help, right? So was I walking around subconsciously telling myself those things? No, but under the surface, and what was driving a lot of my behavior was that idea that, no, you can't ask for 5 to 10 minutes. You've already been gone all day, right? And so once you sit with that, you start to say, why am I holding on to that belief? And what is that? And so now I'm a lot better at seeing it, and I'm a lot more aware. The minute we kind of can create some awareness around it, it's always going to be better. Is it perfect? No. Do I still have moments where those same feelings might bubble up? They do, but I spot it now. I can spot it and I can name it. And so those are some of the things that you'll gain from that process. So for every person, it's different. And I'd love to hear from other people in the next couple of weeks. I know I've heard from some of you already, but how it sort of unfolds in your own life and what it looks like. And if you sort of sit and really reflect on something, what's revealed, because that's where the good stuff sort of is. So does that answer that, Stephanie? Did I explain? Okay.
This is great. So I think what I'd like to do, we've got about 25 minutes. I'm going to stop sharing for a second here.
Okay.
If anyone has questions for Albiona, feel free to use the chat box, and you can type your question and I can call on you to ask it. We also have a few questions that we got through social media before the event started, but I'm looking at this chat box now and I can see there's a couple questions. Albiona, is Kiddos and Insights for parents or children, in what age groups?
Yeah, so I haven't put any bookends on it, in all honesty. I mean, like the example that I gave about talking about my son and I and how I stopped, allowing myself to use a sarcastic tone or sarcasm when I spoke to him. So that would probably be, I suppose that would be applicable to any age, really, depending on what your tone is like as a parent. I'll have more information. As I sort of continue to write, I'll probably organize it in a way to where it'll be preschool age, elementary age, adult, teenagers. And then that way, depending on if you're looking for a specific age group to read about, we'll be able to organize it in that way.
And I'm going to go through a couple questions through social media too.
Sure.
One of them was, can you help with bedtime and morning routines?
So bedtime and morning routines, I'll say this, and again, not an expert. I mean, I probably should have prefaced that from the beginning, but I would say that when I had kids, if the expectation is that something would take 30 minutes, give yourself 45 minutes to an hour. The younger they are, the more time you want to give yourself. It's just always that way. And I think there's so much preparation that needs to happen. For a morning routine or an evening routine, I will say if your children are slightly older, meaning we're in that elementary age and maybe even like 4 or 5 years old, as much as they can do themselves, let them do it. So you want to give some sense of independence. So an example could be, I'm just thinking of like when my own kids got older, we would start to get busy with practices, right? So sporting events happened, we would be running to practice, we'd be coming home and showers were needed, they had to eat, homework. So our evenings became much busier. And then yes, to whoever asked the question, it's a really fair point because then fatigue starts to set in and meltdowns start and all these other, the trickle effect after that tends to be a lot worse. So what I would suggest doing is as much as you can get ahead of it and prepare. So if you know you have practice and you know you have a pretty stacked evening once you get home from there, go tell your kids and you can give them a list. Kids love lists and they love tasks. So give them a list, give them tasks. For kids who can't read yet, use pictures. And it can be 3 or 4 things at the most on there. And it could say, get your pajamas out and get them ready and put them on your bed. Get your backpack ready so that as soon as we come home, we can start on your homework. Maybe it's a choice about whatever their outfit's going to be the next day, if you even want to get ahead. If your child's old enough, let them make their lunches for the next day. So anything you can do earlier and you can jump ahead of whatever that challenging time in your day is always going to work out better. So same thing with your morning routine. This is me, and for everyone, every person is different. I'm a morning person and I always have been. So I always would wake up before my kids. And for some people that's not feasible and I get it. Some people enjoy staying up later at night, but I would wake up and that was sort of my time and I still do it. That's when I write. That's when I answer emails. That's when I do most of my sort of quiet, thinking. So I would say wake up a little bit before them and just get mentally prepared for the day, right? So even if you're not doing anything, even the mental preparation of just calmly entering your day versus rolling out of bed at the same time as they are and sort of frantically trying to get your day going, it's going to set your day up in a way that's going to constantly feel a little bit more jittery, a little bit more chaotic. And so if you can sort of lay the groundwork for a calm day, you're always going to be a step ahead. And then my last little tip on that is let things go. And what I mean by that is my kids were never the kids that fell asleep at 7 o'clock at night. I admired the parents who would get their kids to bed at 7. I'd be like, they sleep from 7 until 7 the next day. That is magic. Mine never did that. They were like 9 to 7, 9 to 7:30, but it was fine. They were fine. And it was enough sleep for them. And I could have sat and fought and done this and put the sleeping method into place and try this and try that. But the truth is we were all happier, so just, you're going to want to think about what works well in your household, let certain things go. The minute you let go, I promise you, your kids start to fall in line. Meaning the minute you stop fighting about bedtime, your kid will come up to you and say, I'm tired. Can I go to bed? The minute you get control out of it, I promise you, they sense it and feel it.
We've got some great comments in the chat box, and I know you probably can't see them too well. So I'm going to let Coach Amy Nylander voice her comment. Amy is one of our Detroit Writing Room coaches, and she specializes in helping with children's books. So Amy, feel free to comment if you would like to.
Yes, no, Albiona, I just met Albiona a few weeks ago. And I went to her website and started reading her articles, and the PAR method is what jumped out. And it was funny because the articles she had written about the sarcasm, my son was exactly that same age. He's 15 now. And so it resonated immediately for me. And so since then, I've been just following along and watching her journey just grow, and listening what you have to say and getting to know your website a little bit more is, I think, just so exciting, because I feel like these are so relatable for everybody. I mean, and opening it up where we can get to know others in the community who are lifting us up through their work is just fantastic. So thank you for sharing your stories with us, and I'm just excited to watch your journey soar.
Thanks, Amy. That means a lot. I'm such a fan of your work, but I appreciate that a lot. You know, there's some vulnerability in this, and I know a lot of my close friends are on here with me, and I remember saying that this is so different than anything else I've ever done, because it's about me. Like, I've pivoted in my life, I've changed directions, I've switched careers, I've done things that are hard, and that's okay, and it's good in its own way, and I've gleaned so much from that process. This was different, and this was a sort of shedding on my part, and a little bit more revelatory and a little bit more exposed. And so there is something to be said about that. So the hope has always been that a parent will read it and feel seen and heard. And so if that means through my story or through somebody else's, or through a suggestion that maybe resonates with you on something you can just tweak or do differently in your own home, that would be, you know, that box is checked. So that would feel awesome. So I appreciate you saying so, and I'll keep writing. We'll see where it goes.
Yes, I think you definitely have a book in the works.
Thank you.
And that is actually a question in the chat box. Where do you see Kiddos and Insights going? Are you thinking of a book?
So Stephanie can tell you this. I have 2 outlines for a book. And so I pushed pause on writing for a minute when we were launching the website. There was a lot involved. And for those of you who know me well, social media is not my favorite. So I've been investing a lot of time in really trying to figure out, you know, how to create a presence on social media and how to navigate that space and what that really looks like. So I've been able to, you know, explore that side of it, but it's been taking me a little bit, you know, away a bit from the writing. So I have 2 different books. I think I might even put on social media. They're 2 very different books. And I talked to Stephanie about this. And one is a little bit more reflective, and it's regarding 10 questions that every parent should ask themselves in their parenting journey. And the other one is the 10 pieces of advice that I couldn't have lived without as a parent. And those are a little bit of story, a little bit of good concrete information, tangible stuff that you could probably put into practice right away. And they excite me both. So who knows, if I have enough ambition, maybe I'll be able to do both, but we'll see where that goes. And I have had a handful of families reach out to me regarding consults and being able to sit down and talk with them and maybe go over the use of the PAR method and maybe addressing certain challenges that they have in their own home environment. So message me if that's something that you're interested in. That's certainly an avenue I'd be willing to explore. I hadn't thought about it, but I'm just really leaning into the whole process, and whatever sort of reveals itself or comes my way, I'd be happy to consider.
And I don't know who, it's called iPhone. You don't have your name up, but they commented to write both books. So that's your answer.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll see if it's 50,000 words. You know, it might take me 10 years, but we'll get there.
I'll help you through it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I should say Stephanie's a fantastic editor. If anybody has any type of writing project, any kind of writing project, she will show you in a heartbeat how to tighten it up and all the way to, she just makes it magic. She just makes it look better.
Thank you. Thank you. We also have Elizabeth is here. Elizabeth is Max's mom, and she commented in the chat box. You're more than welcome to say hello if you'd like to.
Oh, sure.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. No, I just wanted to say, you know, sharing Max's, you know, his epilepsy journey, my role as a caretaker, you know, it's not only been like a lesson in vulnerability, but it's been a real positive experience. I really felt heard when I spoke with you, and, you know, I was able to share your story across, you know, some of my social platforms. And, you know, I'm always been very vocal about, you know, what we're dealing with Max, because I want to be able to help other people, but this took it to another level. and the positive response back has just been overwhelmingly amazing. And I've had people reach out to me that I didn't even know were experiencing similar situations, that I'm happy that I was able to kind of take your role in that situation and be a listener. So it's just, you're amazing. It's an amazing website. I'm so proud to be able to call you a friend. So congratulations.
Thank you. Thanks, Elizabeth. Same right back at you. Yeah, that's so kind to hear. And I knew his story would. I just knew it. It's just that little face of his. And I tell you, I mean, his spirit comes through. And like I said, to know him is to love him. And I did write that in the story. So I'm so glad. I'm so glad the reaction has been positive. And I'm excited to continue to share more stories. And if anybody knows of anyone, like, or has a friend who would maybe be ready to share, or has been on a journey that might sort of resonate with an audience, and they might find others that will feel heard or seen through that story, feel free to tell me. I'd be happy to talk to somebody.
We've got a couple other good questions here. How can I get my 3-year-old to sleep in his room?
Okay, so again, not telling you what's right or what's wrong. Every person has to decide for themselves sort of how they feel. So there's attachment parenting, and that's where parents and a child will usually either share a room or they'll sleep in the same space. I can tell you for myself, I did not ever introduce the idea of sleeping in my room or in my bed, and not for anything, but I know for those of you who know me well, when I don't sleep well, I'm just not that nice. So, and it really gets worse with each restless night and each bad night of sleep. So I made sure that I kind of taught my kids how to sleep on their own and how to be independent sleepers. That being said, though, if you're now in a position where, because it happens usually like when a kiddo is sick, you need to help them. You don't want to let them sleep alone. They need to be comforted. Well, all of a sudden it's 1 night, 2 nights, and then that becomes a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and now it's just the norm. So I do completely understand it. This is what I would do, and you have to sort of ask yourself what your child is like. So maybe to just start to suggest to them to sleep in their room for the whole night. Let's say you do a reward system. So we call this a reinforcement schedule through, as a therapist, that's what I would refer to it as, or as a teacher. And what that means is you say to your child, okay, guess what? Look at you, make the room the way they want it. You make their bed the way they want it. You make them excited about it. You let them choose as much as they possibly can within reason as far as what their room might look like. And then when they go into their room, you might have something like, if you can stay in your room the whole night, you will get a reward the next morning. Or maybe you do a sticker chart, and if they can do 5 nights in a row, then they get a really big prize at the end, because essentially you're teaching a new habit. But for some kids, that's too much. So what that means is you have to pare it down. So maybe 1 full night is impossible. Like, you're asking them to do something that they're just not ready to do. So maybe you start with a different plan that's similar, but maybe you say you start in your room tonight. So tonight you start in your room, and if you stay there for a little while, you allow yourself to sleep. So you know at one point they might get out of their bed in the middle of the night and come to your room. If they can start there and sleep there, then they can, if they can start there and if they can sleep there, then they can get their reward or their sticker or whatever it is the next morning. And then maybe the next day you give a little bit more. So maybe now the next day we have a situation where we say, okay, you did a really good job yesterday. You're so close to that big prize. So tonight I need you to stay there a little bit longer, and until you see the sunlight in the morning, or until, and you can give any kind of marker, you then can come into mommy's room, right? So you can sort of chunk it up so that they're going to do a little bit, a little bit, a little bit, until they can fully find themselves safe, calm, and happy to sleep in their own rooms. So what ends up happening is when a child gets used to sleeping with a parent, and then we want to transition them back into their room, it's like an all or nothing. So usually a parent will just say, okay, and they'll try. And the problem is that's too hard. So then it falls apart, and then you're exhausted. So you don't have any will in you to fight it. So then you just take them back into your bed with you, and it sort of all becomes for nothing. And then you find yourself on this continuous hamster wheel all the time. So then you'll reintroduce it the next month. You'll put the same expectations on it, and then this will happen. And again, you're too fatigued to do anything about it. So try to really consider the expectation in your child in that process. So if you know it's going to be really hard for your child, start off with just starting in their room.
There's a comment on this topic from Alicia Adam, who talked about using the Calm app. And hopefully, if I'm mispronouncing her name, I'm so sorry. But if you want to add anything to that, you're welcome to.
Are you asking me or Alicia?
Oh, Alicia, if she wanted
Okay.
to say anything. Give her a sec.
Okay.
Hi, we're in the same room. My phone died. No, I started doing this a while ago. Well, can you turn that one down? Sorry. The day that my kids were going back to school after the holiday, I knew there was no way they were going to sleep before like 11 o'clock. And I use the Calm app for myself and listen to sleep stories, and I fall asleep within minutes. I don't remember what I listened to, when I fell asleep, how I fell asleep. I just fall asleep. So I just decided to put one on for Ruby, and tonight will be at 11, I think, that she falls asleep within 10 minutes. I listen, and I can scroll through my phone, check emails while the story's on. So it's not even like I'm not like worried about getting out of there to like handle the stuff I would normally handle after the kids go to sleep. I can do it in there. And I swear to you, within 10 minutes, she's sound asleep. I back out of the room. I turn the story off, and she sleeps the whole night. I am mad that I didn't do it like a year ago. So that's all.
That's great.
Now
We've got one last question from social media. What suggestions do you have for
You're gonna
siblings?
put it up or me? You.
One, who are jealous of each other.
Say it again. Siblings that are jealous of each other. Is that what you said? Okay. Okay. So siblings that are jealous of each other, I'm assuming they mean younger siblings. So if that's the case, there's a couple of things you want to think about. For starters, because I don't know, is it that the 4-year-old is jealous of the baby, or the 1-year-old sometimes becomes jealous of the older child as they start to want their parents' attention? So you'll sort of I would want to know which one, or is it both? The other thing you want to be really cognizant of if that starts to happen is you want to stay consistent with your child. So for instance, if you say to your 4-year-old, okay, you get to have the toy now, and here comes the 1-year-old and wants to take the toy back. And now we know the 4-year-old, we can reason with the 4-year-old, and they're not going to have a huge tantrum. So I might say to the 4-year-old, just give baby the toy because baby's going to cry and I have to cook dinner, or whatever the case is. That's where we find ourselves in that sort of unhealthy loop, because what ends up happening then is the 4-year-old's going, well, wait a minute, I waited, I get a turn. And remember, even at 4, their brain is still underdeveloped. We're one of the only species that is born with an undeveloped brain. I mean, there's a reason a child will have a fit in Target on the floor and we don't as an adult, right? And it's because they don't have inhibition yet. They don't know how to do that. They feel it, they express it, and it reveals itself in ways that we don't always love. And that's the tricky part about, the kid piece of it. So I would say to stay consistent. So if the child wants the toy, the baby, and you see that it's now not the baby's turn, you have to stick to your guns on that one. So that means if the baby's going to have a tantrum, let the baby have a tantrum, because the 4-year-old needs to also understand that things are consistent for him too, meaning fairness won't change, right? That's what they're really looking for. When there's a new sibling introduced to the family, it's a lot of different emotions. They're taking a lot of things in. So as consistent as you can be in your household, and if you can keep things as close to the same with that child, they will jump back really quickly from it, because that's what they want to gauge is, are things going to change now because child A is here or child B is here? So they're going to really want to know what impact that's going to have on them. If it is the other way around, like the baby doesn't want, or I'm sorry, the 4-year-old is jealous of the baby, it's really the same thing. You're just going to always kind of stay consistent, but you're going to want to think about, are you making time, maybe special one-on-one time? So because that child's a little bit older, you could do something like, hey, let's say baby's teething and you have to pay them a little bit more attention. You can say, sister's not feeling so good right now. She's teething. She didn't sleep all night. I have to really kind of hold her a little bit longer than I normally would. But as soon as she goes down for a nap, I want you to pick 2 of your favorite games, get them ready for me so we can play those things together. And you want to let them know that they're still seen, they're still heard, they're still there, and that you're going to participate in some things that might be just some nice one-on-one time.
I think those are all the questions we have from social. Is there a final burning question from anyone in the audience here? You're welcome to kind of raise your hand or take yourself off mute, or comments too are welcome as well. Oh, we got one from Tyler. Tyler, go for it.
Hi, thank you so much for doing this. This has been awesome. I think it's strange because while I'm not a parent, I think that this also has a lot to do with how children can also be, because I myself, if my mom was on this call, she would tell you stories that, you know, I was a hellraiser. That's what it was. And I think that having kind of this outlook is very, it kind of opened my mind to things. It was very interesting because I never thought about all this different advice, especially in terms of the sarcasm. I'm a very sarcastic person, and my mom is also a very sarcastic person, but we've kind of, as I've grown up, we've kind of taken that from a different perspective, because when I was 16 or 17, it would be like, oh, what are you doing today? I don't know, anything. And then, you know, it would go from there and move on, and basically it would build. And what I'm getting to is essentially, thank you for kind of expanding on my thought process. It kind of opened my mind. I'm still kind of reeling from all of it. As you can tell, I'm having a lot of trouble talking about it. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. This was awesome.
I really appreciate that, Tyler. Thank you. And it's nice to see you here. It's interesting that you say that, because I've had several people reach out to me since I launched the website, and I can think of a couple coworkers who don't have children. And that's the first thing they said to me, is they said, it's amazing because I don't have kids, but I'm unpacking my own childhood as I'm reading it, or I'm seeing themes that I still carry with me that I sort of went through, and I didn't even realize that that's why I'm making some of the choices that I'm making. So to some extent, I mean, it's all relatable. I mean, that's why I even mentioned with the PAR method, I use it really in a lot of aspects of my life, not just to parent, or not just when I'm in a therapy session with a child, or when I was a teacher. So to know that you're getting something out of it, and that it's allowing you to see things in a new way, that makes my day. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tyler. We do have one other person with their hand raised. It says iPhone. You're welcome to take yourself off mute and ask your question or share a comment.
That's me, Aphrodita. Hi. I just wanted to say, when I was reading through the articles, I enjoyed the remedy sarcasm with pausing. Reflecting back, I did a lot of reflecting back as a parent. My children are 14. The PAR method, I found it interesting. And I found it interesting because as a parent, I agree we react quickly when you are having kind of a crazy situation with your kids, and why I never thought I could say in that moment, wait, stop, I need a minute before I make that decision. And now I am using that, and it is so helpful and so liberating. Whether I need those 5 seconds, sometimes an hour or two, like I need to think about that decision. And I find that I make decisions better. You're not as aggressive or snappy, or you're not reacting from your long day at work where you're just walking in, taking off your coat, and you're not reacting from that stressful day to the kids. You are now making a decision based off of what they're asking or what they're saying to you. So I wanted to say that that one, and two, the personal articles that you put in, I find so interesting, because as a parent, then you can relate back to what they're saying in different situations. And I like to see the personal articles a lot.
Oh, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
It means the world to me. I appreciate it. Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I went through the same process as a parent, and the minute I started to pause, I did start to have better reactions. And you know what's funny, and you'll see it too with your own kids, is that I started to do the same thing. Like, I just need a minute. My kids do it to me now, right? Like, they're not reactionary anymore. They are sometimes, because we're human, but they're much better at going like, and like pausing and really taking it in. And that was inadvertent. That was sort of a ripple effect or a compound effect that happened. It wasn't because I would tell them to do that, you know? So
No.
I think that mirror neuron piece of it too, like
Right.
when I raise my voice, your kids are going to raise their voice. And
Sure.
this is so true. You know, I remember when I was teaching one time, I lost my voice and I had laryngitis and I had to whisper. And so the entire group of preschoolers whispered back to me. And it wasn't because I told them to whisper. It was because they just, we have mirror neurons. And when it's presented one way, we generally want to mirror back what we see. So that's super cool. And I'm glad you feel that way. I'll keep writing personal stories as long as my kids keep letting me. So
I enjoy them. I enjoy them. Your personal stories. And I do enjoy, like, I loved Max's story. I fell in love with him. I don't know if Elizabeth is still on, but I cried and laughed in the story. And I did. I love him. He is a beautiful child. He's just a beautiful child. He is so cute. I really appreciated that story. And Albiona, I was the one that said that you should write the 2 books.
thank you.
So
I appreciate
keep going.
it.
And that was it.
Thank you. I
Good
appreciate
job,
it
Mom.
so much.
It's a little after 8, so I want to be mindful and respectful of your time. But Albiona, to wrap up, where I put links in the chat box, but if you want to tell people where to find you and how to support you.
Yeah, so subscribe to the website if you haven't already. Just go right on there. The box will pop up, or you can scroll to the bottom and just put your email in. I will email people updates and posts, and it's pretty new. So things are it's a work in progress. So if I see demand for certain things, we can always pivot and change. I'm always open for questions. You can find me at Kiddos and Insights on Instagram, and you can find me at the same handle on Facebook. Message me, email me. I'm open for questions. I love stories. So if you have a good one, which I think everyone does, is my personal belief, please share.
Thank you. This was such a pleasure hosting your virtual launch party, and I am so excited for all the stories to come. You've got a reader base already, and I think they want more, so keep going for sure. And I want to thank everybody else for being here tonight. Again, your ticket supported Coaching Detroit Forward, and I put another link in the chat box. Our next fundraising event is a book talk fundraiser with the author of I, Detroit, Marcus Lyon, on February 20th. And we're actually going to have other literacy nonprofits join in, Beyond Basics and Progressionista, and tickets are going to be split between the 3 organizations. So it's another virtual event. We would love to have you all back for that. You can check out the link in the chat box for more. And I will send around a video recap soon with this event in case you want to share it with anybody else. But we thank you so much for being here tonight, and go check out kiddosandinsights.com and follow Albiona's stories.
Thanks, Stephanie. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate the support.
You did awesome.
Amazing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good job. I don't know what
Good job.
Thank you. Hi.
Hey, what's up, dude?
Hi, guys. That's my son, everyone, and my niece and nephew and sister-in-law. Hi, guys. There's Ruby. Hi.
Hi, guys.
Oh, there's Lena.
Oh.
There's Lena.